All right. Okay, good people, you ready to go? Ready? All right, here we go. Oops, and it's the wrong button. All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Thursday. Does anyone else feel like today should be Friday, but it feels like Friday, but it's not? Yeah. What's going on? Why does it feel like?
We just want it to be the weekend.
It's just a want. It's not.
Yeah.
There's nothing else happening. We're so close though, and we get a long weekend this weekend, right? Because Monday's a holiday. Nobody knows. Good morning. Okay, Unati, you're here. Good morning to you. Let's jump in. So, let me just see what my first slide is here. Oh yes, okay. Influenza Epidemic 1918, right? So we read a little bit about this yesterday. This is something that happens just at the tail end of World War I, right? And so we said that this influenza virus kind of appears maybe in Kansas somewhere at an army base. There's a couple of other early instances of it as well in other parts of the world, so we're not entirely sure, but let's just go with Kansas. Starts off in an army barracks, and then as those soldiers are shipped out to war, it spreads throughout, well, the entire planet, right? And so huge numbers of people are infected. Hey, Jim and Michelle. Up here, okay. I'm good, Miles. Okay, huge numbers of people are infected. Huge numbers of people die, right? Because huge numbers of people die because there's no vaccine, and there's not really a strong idea in terms of science, in terms of what this actually is, right? And so we read about some of the treatments that people are sort of administering. How are they treating this influenza virus in 1918? What are some of the things they're doing? Yeah, they're bloodletting, right? So there's this idea that, oh, your problem is you have too much blood. We're gonna drain a little bit out of you.
Just cut it? Is that what they do with the leeches?
Yeah, leeches were a way to bloodlet as well. People don't really like leeches very much, but now that we have, syringes and things, we can actually draw blood from people. I don't know that there's any medical benefit to removing your blood for any reason, but people were doing it. What else were they doing? They were snorting tobacco. Yeah, that should cure your influenza virus, right? What else were they doing? The what? Oh, well, I guess it's possible. It's no stranger than any of the other things we've heard, right? What else did they say? Whiskey. Sit on a cane chair with a candle underneath it. Sounds dangerous to me. Anyway, none of these things have any real effect on the virus, right? And so people are kind of helpless to just deal with it. And, there's lots of mask wearing, there's lots of quarantining. It's basically all people can do, right? So we know what an influenza virus is. And so I gave you this article to work on yesterday. I gave you 4 questions for homework that you're going to hand in to me by the end of today. And so I'd like to give you just a little time in class to finish that up. can you give me maybe some indication of how much time might be useful for you to finish this? How much time do you think you need? 20? Is that a lot? Is that a little? What do other people think? Hello, hello. What do you think?
I have a lot of free time. I can do it like in the next block.
You can do it in the okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else want to weigh in? Is 20? All right. Tell you what. I can go. I'm gonna go 13 minutes. Okay. So that's not quite 20, but it should be enough. And again, if you need a little bit of extra time later today, hopefully that's not too much. Okay. So keep in mind that the assignment is in Microsoft Teams, so you can use. There's a Word document inside the assignment that you can type in your answers in so that I can very easily look at it and mark it. So I'll give you those 13 minutes. I know it's a weird number, but whatever. And then we will move on to some other things, okay? Okay. Okay, good people. That will do it. That will do it for assignment time. So again, hand that in to me before midnight tonight, please and thank you, and I will have that marked over the weekend, okay? So, what's next? Ah, yes, okay. So, just to sort of tie a bow or tie a knot on World War I and Europe for a little while, of course we'll come back to Europe in just a little bit, but I want to do something else for a couple days. But here we had the end of World War I with the Treaty of Versailles, right? So it was attended by most countries who participated in World War I, except for who was not at the Treaty of Versailles negotiations? Which country? Russia and Germany were not there. Everyone else was. They hashed out a peace treaty that sort of redrew the lines of Europe along ethnic borders, or at least it was supposed to. It did not quite do that, but it was supposed to do that. It called for Germany to take responsibility for the war, and it called for them to pay reparations for the damage that was done, right? It also called for the establishment of a League of Nations, right? And so this was Woodrow Wilson's dream, right? So Woodrow Wilson felt that yes, all of these countries got involved in a conflict, but what if there was some power above that, right? What if there was some sort of level of government where all the nations were together and they could, kind of keep nations from acting badly, right? And so he had this idea for the League of Nations. He got it written into the Treaty of Versailles. But of course, as we discussed, when he got home to the U.S., he needed the American Congress, the House of Representatives, to ratify that agreement, to approve it. And they didn't, right? They didn't approve it, nor did they choose to join the League of Nations. And so I can only imagine Woodrow Wilson was pretty dismayed to have kind of worked so hard, and then the American government to say, actually, no, we don't want to do that after all. But the League itself did become a thing, right? And the League of Nations is kind of the forerunner to the current United Nations, developed after World War I, and again, had its kind of origins in Woodrow Wilson's 14 points. I don't want to spend too much time on the League because ultimately it is unsuccessful, okay? So it has some role to play in terms of setting international standards for things. It has some role to play in doing some sort of charity and humanitarian work. So the League of Nations is kind of somewhat of a success in that way, but ultimately it winds up being a bit of a failure, and it winds up being a failure for basically three reasons. Number one, because membership was voluntary, right? So you could choose to be part of the League of Nations, and some countries choose not to, right? And most notably, the United States is one that chooses not to, and that's important, right? Because the United States is a big, important, economically powerful country, and it makes a difference when they're not there, right? The second thing that's an issue here is that resolutions, so decisions that were made by the League of Nations, they had to be unanimous. What does unanimous mean?
Everyone agrees.
Yeah, everyone has to agree. Does that sound realistic? That you could vote on something and everyone would agree on it? No, right? In almost no cases is anything that gets voted on unanimous, right? It's ridiculous to expect it, and I don't know why the founders of the League of Nations decided that this was a good idea, but it winds up it winds up tying the League's hands, because anything they try to do, they put it forward, and just one vote against means that it doesn't pass. And so the League spends a lot of time trying to get things decided, but everything they put forward, is not a unanimous vote. Right? The third thing, and I think this is an issue of the current United Nations as well, is that everyone has to give up a little bit of their power for this thing to work, right? So if the League of Nations is going to work, let's say Canada, for instance, Canada has to agree that, okay, we're going to let the League of Nations tell us what to do sometimes, right? But does that sound like something that governments want to do? No, they don't, right? They don't want anyone else telling them what to do. And so if you don't give up a bit of your power to this larger thing, then can that larger thing tell anyone what to do? Not really, right? So here we have a group that's supposed to sort of work on top of all of the countries of the world, and yet it has no power to do anything, right? It can't make anyone do anything. It has no army, right? It has no army to make people do things, and it requires unanimous voting, right? It requires everyone to agree, which nobody ever agrees on everything, on anything. So ultimately we see that it's not a very useful entity. Again, it has some charitable humanitarian success. That's actually not, that's a kind of a success for League of Nations. I think we could probably agree that the United Nations that exists now probably does a better job of that kind of stuff, right? Humanitarian and charitable aid. It doesn't work. The League of Nations gets involved in a conflict with Japan in Manchuria, which proves very useless in really doing anything about. Same thing with the Italians in Ethiopia. The League of Nations proves reasonably ineffective, and so, yeah, it's sort of, it's a trial run for the United Nations. It does not go very well. Some of the larger countries don't join. Later, some of the bigger countries leave, and so it's just not much gets done, sadly. Not a bad idea, but it just doesn't work out. The other thing we should remember about Europe in World War I is that huge sections of land are completely and utterly destroyed, right? So again, we have we have a war that cost a lot of money, right? And a war that people probably weren't that ready to fight. And so if you look at European countries, everybody's bank account is cleaned out, right? So there's no more money left. They've also had a lot of their infrastructure damaged. What's infrastructure? What's infrastructure? You can Google it if you like. Ask the Google. Say that one more time.
The basic physical and organizational structures and facilities.
Right. The basic physical and organizational structures and facilities. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So basically this is the physical structure that you need to run a country or a society, right? What do you need? You need roads, right? You need plumbing and sewage systems. You need electrical lines. You need telegraph cables in 1918, not so much anymore. You need telegraph cables. You need ports, right, that can unload ships. You need, again, roads and buildings and electricity and all that stuff. But all of that stuff has been damaged because of World War I, right? These countries have been bombing the heck out of each other for 4 years. And so before you can kind of get back to normal life and before you can sort of get your economy operating again, you have to rebuild all that stuff, right? And remember the whole scorched earth thing when the Germans retreated? Well, they destroyed farmers' fields, right? And they burned down structures and they knocked over telegraph poles and they tried to destroy the infrastructure while removing themselves from France, right? And so, again, the French have to rebuild all that stuff before you can do anything else, right? Before you can kind of start the economy going again. And so that's a bit of a problem. The other issue is that huge numbers of young men have died, right? And this is a huge problem because if you think about it, societies are kind of constantly going through these cycles, right? And so you all are at a period in your life where, you know, you're kind of headed into either university or some sort of other training, and then after that you'll hopefully get a job, right? And the economy, let's assume you stay in Canada, the economy in Canada counts on you because young people are going to enter the workforce and they're going to need clothing and maybe a car and maybe they'll want to buy a condo or something or a house and you know then they're going to have kids and then they're going to have to buy those kids things. And so the economy kind of relies on new generations kind of coming forward, right? And you know, starting to consume, starting to buy things. But what do you think happens when basically you kill 10 million of your young, or yeah, if you kill 10 million of your young men in the space of a few years? There's a gap, right? There's a whole almost generation of young men that are not there, right? They're not there to, you know, go to university. They're not there to step into the workforce. They're not there to buy the things that the country expects them to buy. And so what's going to happen to the economy? You know, you're going to take a bit of a drop because you're missing all of those people, right? You're missing all of those human beings. What about the birth rate? What do you think is going to happen there if you're missing all of those men? It's going to take a little dip, right? So the effects of losing all those people are going to be felt immediately, but they're also going to be felt in the future because the birth rate went down as well, right? And so it's a tragedy, it's a loss of human life, but there's also kind of an entire section of society that is missing, that has been kind of chopped out and removed. And that's going to have effects down the line, right? Social effects and economic effects. So even though the war is over, which is great, there's a huge amount of rebuilding to do. There's a huge amount of economic recovery to do. And European countries are not in a great spot, right? And particularly, Russia, but we'll talk about Russia later, particularly Germany and France, right? That's where most of the fighting has occurred. That's where most of the death has occurred. And so those two countries are really going to struggle to kind of get back on their feet. Okay? Yeah, so again, huge amounts of infrastructure destroyed, almost 750,000 people who have no home anymore because their homes have been blown up. All of this infrastructure is destroyed. And again, huge amounts of money have been spent, right? There's no more money in the bank. Countries are broke at the end of this. Yeah, so you can see, you know, a few images from the time, right? So I assume that used to be a forest. It's kind of hard to tell what it used to be, right? It's been completely and utterly destroyed. Here's kind of a before and after. You can see this cute little street scene. I think this is Saint Martin. So this is a French town prior to World War I. And as you can see after, not a lot of work to do, right? A lot of rebuilding to do. Yeah, and so again, this Treaty of Versailles gets signed in order that, you know, a great conflict like this never happens again. So I guess we'll see how that pans out, right? I think what I'd like to do, yes, here we go. this is what I'd like to talk about next. So we're going to press pause on Europe and sort of all-out total war for a little while, and we're going to enter the 1920s. Okay. Now, this is important. If you ever get a chance to go back in time, hey, technology is amazing, right? I mean, I never thought, 10 years ago, I never thought I'd be able to broadcast my class to the world. But here we are, so don't laugh. If you ever get to go back in time, I would like you to consider going back to the United States in the 1920s, okay? The 1920s is, for the most part, a super fun, interesting period of history. I don't know whether you could find a period of Western history where so much exciting change is happening, okay? Culturally, economically, it's a wild time to be alive, okay? And again, the 20s are called roaring for a couple of reasons, okay? So one reason that, what does it mean to roar? Roar? Like Katy Perry sings about? Yeah, like lions roar, right? They make a big noise. And the 20s made a big noise too. So one of the ways in which they were roaring is the economy. So after World War I is over, the US economy really kicks off, okay? And so there's all kinds of production that has been happening during the war, right? All sorts of US factories were building bombs and guns and planes and tanks and all kinds of stuff. And now there's no need for that anymore. But their factories are set up and the wheels are turning. And so what are they going to produce? Well, they start producing consumer goods, right? So all of the kind of things that we are familiar with, like vacuum cleaners and radio, well, you're not familiar with radios because nobody listens to that anymore, but radios, vacuum cleaners, washing machines, ovens, electric refrigerators, all of these things are kind of new on the market. And so when these military factories are kind of done producing things for World War I, they simply switch over and start creating things for the consumer market. And so the economy becomes it becomes a consumer economy, which is important because that's what we still have, right? Our economy is run on people buying things that they want in addition to things that they need, right? And so this starts in the 1920s, people buying luxury items, right? Things that they like. The other reason it's roaring is because, well, at least for some people anyway, the Roaring 20s is one big party, okay? So fashionable clothes, if anyone is interested in fashion basically begins here in the United States in the 1920s. Music, dancing, drinking, all kinds of wild and crazy things are happening in 1920. And again, it's, prior to 1920, the 1910s were a very conservative time for the United States. People were conservative. They were careful with their savings. They were very religious and respectful. And in the 20s, things get a little wild, a little out of hand, right? And so we'll kind of show how that happens. To start with, I have 3 pages I'd like you to read and a few questions to answer, and then I have a video to show you that will kind of introduce us to what was going on in the 20s, because again, it was a wild and crazy time, so if you ever get a chance to go back in time, I would consider it. But anyway, what I'll do is I'll give you a few minutes to read this section of the textbook and answer these questions so we can talk about them, and then see some video in the 1920s, okay? Coolio? All right, let's do it. Okay, it's way too noisy for people reading. Say that again? Oh, I just uploaded it. It should be there. It should be there. Hey, Lawrence. If you walk through that door in 5 years, you'll know that you're there.
No, but just the first mistake of time travel, you can't go see but it'll mess up something in the universe.
Yeah. Well, no,
Everything will explode.
I didn't know what that's a movie,
That's not real life.
as opposed to
Real life time travel.
real life time travel.
rise the people's standing of living?
Why did it raise people's standard of living?
Yeah.
I think it did two things. So we can talk about this a bit, but what happens when you invest in, when you buy stock in a company? What does that mean?
Like you're investing their future?
Yeah. So like, how does it actually work?
How? Because
Okay, so you own a company.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna buy stock in Mark's company. What are you gonna do with that money?
Like maybe like invest in new technology or new goods.
Sure, right? You're going to take that money from your shareholders, the
Yeah.
people who buy shares, and you're going to invest it in the company, right? Maybe you'll build another factory or open another location or invest in some R&D or something like that, so that the company will make more money. And when the company does make money, you might pay me a dividend, so I might get a little bit of that money.
Yeah.
Or the stock price will rise because your company's worth more, and then I can sell my stocks and get a bunch of money. So I think two things are going on. Number one, your company is getting bigger and better and selling more products, hopefully. And I have the ability to kind of make some money off that.
Oh wait, does the boom mean rising of the stock market?
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, you thought boom meant like
Yeah.
total destruction?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so I was answering the wrong question.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. Booms are good. Booms are good, busts are,
Okay, cool.
yeah, busts are bad. Sorry about that.
So does boomers mean like, cause there's a lot of, like baby boomers?
Yeah,
A lot of babies just came.
a lot of babies, poof, raining from the sky. That's a World War II thing, right? Once the war was over, people were happy and excited and chose to celebrate that. Yeah, chose to make babies. Like my parents. Okay, so you want to take a little bit of a break there, hardworking people? Okay, let's no?
Yeah, why not?
Oh yeah, when I thought you said no, I was like, oh, you're gonna be popular. No, it's okay. Yeah, let's take a break. Come back, we'll finish this, and then we'll talk about our questions, okay? Okay, people, we are officially back. So, the Roaring Twenties. First question here, number 3? What was life like in these Roaring Twenties, according to the textbook? Anyway, fun. What? New. Everything was new. There was lots of new stuff happening for sure. They were fun. What else? What? Party. Well, maybe for the very rich, they were partying all day. But yeah, okay. What else? Cars. Yeah. Cars are new. Radios are new. Is that another question about technology? Let me see. Okay, no. Yeah, what kind of technologies are showing up? Radios, automobiles? Yeah. Automobiles are new. What else is new? What else is happening in the 20s that's exciting? What? Yeah, there's lots of alcohol flowing until there's Prohibition, but that's another thing. What? Contribution? Constitution?
Is that like the law of banning of alcohol?
Yeah, that was Prohibition. Yeah, so at one point in the kind of 1920s, a lot of U.S. states go ahead and they ban the sale of alcohol. So there's no alcohol for sale anywhere. But does that stop people from drinking? No, because people like to have a good time. So what do?
They make their own alcohol.
Yeah, people start making their own alcohol, right? So you can imagine, and who do you think is making all of this illegal alcohol? Mafia, yeah. So it's kind of like, it seems like here in Vancouver we're in the middle of a drug war right now, but yeah, but this is the earlier version of it, right? So instead of making illegal drugs and gang members shooting each other in the street, here we have people making illegal alcohol and mobsters shooting each other in the street because they're dealing this illegal substance. They're dealing alcohol, right? Where are people drinking all of this booze?
Everywhere.
What's that?
Everywhere.
No, well, not everywhere because it's illegal, right? So, yeah, so there's drinking at home, but where else? Yeah, secretly. And so they mention in the textbook there's these speakeasies, right? And alcohol makes it much easier for you to speak, right? Because once people start drinking, they start blabbering away about everything, right? I love you, man, and all that stuff. But yeah, so that's why they get called speakeasies, because people find it much easier to talk once they've had 1 or 2 drinks, right? So there's these kind of bars, but they're hidden away, and you can only get in if you have the password, right? And if the guy opens the little peeper in the door and looks at you and thinks you're a cop or you don't look right, closes it and you can't get in, right? So yeah, the sale of alcohol is made illegal, but of course that doesn't stop people from having a good time. Alcohol is manufactured, alcohol is consumed, and everybody continues to party, party on, right? What else is happening here? Movies? Yeah. So the first talkies, if you will, right? So movies that actually have audio. Shocking, right? But those are brand new. Hollywood gets its start around 1920 as well. What else? Is there other stuff happening? There is, but it may not come up in the textbook. Okay, well that's a good start. So this might be a little bit of a complicated one, but what's going on with this stock market thing? So there's a stock market boom, which Mark and I have established means that things are good, right? The stock market is going up. But what's happening with regard to the stock market? Yeah, right. The U.S. economy is really strong, right? There's lots of production, lots of sales. Companies are growing and growing. People are making tons of money, and so the stock market is kind of growing as well, and people are making money through that. Does the textbook talk about how people are kind of getting into the stock market? Because this might be important to understand if the textbook describes it. Does it? No? Okay, well let's see what the textbook says here. Right. So I'm looking at the top of page. No, I'm looking at the page 88, kind of on the left side. Large numbers of speculators. What are speculators? What's that? People who to speculate is to kind of like imagine things, right? Imagine the outcome of things. What does it mean in this context, though? There's lots of real estate speculators here in Vancouver. What do they do? They what? Sometimes.
Most of the time, that's what they do.
Yeah. So speculators are people who invest in things hoping that they're going to pay off big in the end, right? So you're kind of placing your bet either by buying real estate or buying a condo or buying stock, thinking that it's going to go up in the future and you're going to make a ton of money, right? That's what speculation is about. Kind of investing in something, and it's kind of a gamble. It's kind of a bet. But if you're right, you're going to make major cash, right? So that's what speculators are. And here there's lots of speculators that are in the stock market trying to make money. And make money they do because, again, production is going like crazy, right? People are manufacturing things. People are buying those manufactured things. And there's money flying around everywhere, right? People are just trying to grab it out of the air, if you will. But, let's see. Okay, let me explain to you what happens, because the textbook does not explain this very well, and it's worth understanding. Everybody with me? Everybody with me? Okay, so what starts to happen is people start to buy these stocks on margin, okay? Now, the thing about the stock market is to be in the stock market, you need some extra money, yes? Yeah, you need money to lose, right? You need money to invest. Lots of people don't have it, but it turns out they're able to borrow it from the bank, because one of the other new things that show up in the 1920s is credit, okay? And again, we're very used to credit nowadays. We have credit cards, right? You have a phone plan and you pay at the end of the month, right? Because they just assume that you're going to pay. You buy a car, you buy a house, you make monthly payments, right? That's the way of the world. But this is brand new in 1920. Before 1920, if you wanted something, you saved your money and then you bought it. That was it. So credit is new. People start to borrow money from the bank, right? And so maybe this is Miles' plan, okay? Miles is going to borrow 10 grand from the bank, $10,000, okay? He's going to invest it in the stock market. He's going to wait a few years for his stocks to rise, and then he's going to sell those stocks for higher. He's going to cash out. He's going to pay the bank back the $10,000, and then maybe his stocks are worth $20,000. So he's going to pocket a cool $10,000 for doing nothing at all. Sounds easy, right? It is easy. And it's great until your stocks don't go up. Okay? And so what's going to happen here is a couple of things. Lots of people are investing in the market this way. They're borrowing from the bank, they're buying stocks, and they're thinking that the stocks will go up and up and up, they'll sell them, they'll pay the bank back, and then they'll have free money, okay? The other thing that's happening is that people are producing things so fast that they're not really paying attention to a good business plan. They're not really thinking about their market. Let me ask you all, either in your current homes or in your homes back home, how many vacuum cleaners do you have in the house? 0? 0? 2? 1? What do you think the average number of vacuum cleaners per household is? Probably 1, right? Maybe you could get 2 if you have, a multi-level house and you don't want to drag it up the stairs, right? But do you need 3? 4? No, right? Ridiculous. How many washing machines do you need in the house? 1, right? Nobody needs 2 washing machines. Once you've got 1, you're good, right? But the problem is that people are producing these things like crazy. And so the market goes up and up and up, let's say for washing machines, up and up and up and up, but then eventually everyone's kind of got one, right? Everyone who wants to buy one has bought one. And so what happens to sales? Yeah, they kind of level out and then they start to drop. Now, if Shota's company is making washing machines and production and sales start to go down, what does he do with his staff? The people who work for him. What's that? Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, you kind of you get rid of your staff, right? You put them on a shorter work week. Maybe you lay some of them off because you're not producing as much, right? You don't want to keep producing if you're not selling. And so now people are starting to lose their jobs, right? Can they afford to buy washing machines now? No, right? So as people get laid off, sales start to go down for other things too, even further. If companies aren't as profitable, so Shota's company was selling, let's say 100 washing machines a month. Now he's only selling 70 a month. Is he making as much money? No. What do you think the stock price in his company is like? Going down, right? But there's a problem because Miles invested his $10,000 in Shota's washing machine company. And the price of Shota's stock is now declining. So is Miles getting nervous? Why? Yeah, right? Miles is still going to owe the bank $10,000, right? What if Shota's stock goes below that so that Miles' stock that he bought for $10,000 is not worth $10,000, but it's worth $7,000? Debt. Miles is going to owe the bank $3,000 even if he sells his stock right now. Does Miles have $3,000? No, that's why he borrowed the 10 in the first place, right? So what's Miles going to do? No. It's another S word. Sell, right? He's going to get on the phone and say, sell, right? Get rid of my stocks because the stock price is dropping and I need to sell these shares and get at least my $10,000 back so I can pay the bank off and not be in debt, right? So he's going to do that. But there's a problem because it's not just Miles. It's a bunch of people. It's everybody doing that, right? Suddenly everyone's on the phone saying, oh my God, the stock price is dropping. Sell, right? And then everybody's selling. And then everyone panics because the market is dropping, right? As there are more sellers, there are fewer buyers, which means the price of everything starts to go down. Everybody panics. Everybody's on the phone. Sell. But you can't sell if nobody buys, right? And that's what happens on October 28th? Yeah. That's what happens on October 28th. Everybody is trying to sell. Nobody is buying. And the stock prices simply collapse, right? And people's money is gone, right? So people like Miles who bought $10,000 of shares in Shota's company, they're worth nothing. They're worth a couple of bucks, right? So you, my friend, you, my friend, now owe $10,000 to the bank, which you probably can't repay. And you're not the only one, so don't feel bad, because there's tons of people out there who have the same thing has happened. Their stock prices dropped too quickly, they weren't able to sell, and now they are in debt, right? They owe the bank money that they can't pay back, right? But there's another problem. Banks in this period are not big banks like we're used to, right? We see like TD and who else? Scotiabank, Bank of Montreal, big banks, right? Huge, massive banks. But at the time, banks in the US are actually quite small. They're almost like little private things. And so people panic, right? Because the stock prices drop, there's no money, and so people rush to the bank to withdraw their savings, right? Because they don't want it to disappear. But the banks don't have their money because the banks have invested it for them. And so there is a run on the banks. Everybody runs to the bank to try and get their money out, but they can't because there's no money left. Banks go bankrupt, which again is, cannot be allowed to happen in the modern world. But in this world, it does. People's life savings are gone, right? Banks collapse. And so it's kind of like a massive party until the entire thing falls off a cliff, and then it's desperate and awful, right? The stock market crash here on October 28th, people are jumping out of windows in skyscrapers. People are committing suicide because they've lost everything, right? So it's a dark day. It's a dark day for the US, right? It's a wild party for a lot of this period, but then once we get to 1928, the economy basically collapses, okay? And then we're into a dark depression is what we're in. But let's not quite go there now. But that's what happened. It's a complicated series of events, and it's brought on by, a really big boom in economic activity, but it's also brought on by the fact that there's not a lot of government regulation, okay? So the government is staying out of the market. They're just letting it do its thing. Have you ever heard of the invisible hand? It's not a ghost story. Yeah? Yeah. So this is economist Adam Smith thought that, markets were kind of like living things. And you didn't have to do anything. As a government, you just keep your hands out of it, and the market will be guided as if by an invisible hand, right? It will run itself, basically. Which to some degree is true, but as the US finds out here, to some degree it's not true. If you do not regulate your economy, it will go like this. Okay? And that's not good for anyone because, as you can see, things are fantastic until they are desperate and awful. Okay? And so, really, you need some government regulation to make sure that the economy stays nice and steady, right? And that's what you want. You want nice, steady, incremental growth, right? Maybe 1% a year, 1.5%, nothing crazy, just steady growth. But again, if the government doesn't do anything, the market will go all over the place, right? Up and down, boom and bust. And again, nobody likes that, right? That's brutal when it falls apart. And here it does. It absolutely falls apart on the Americans. But yeah, so, but we don't want to get to that just yet. Okay. I think that sets us up fairly well for tomorrow. And so tomorrow what we'll do is we will look at that short documentary. It's only about 45 minutes, but it talks about what's happening in the US in the 20s. So we'll hear about some of the things that we've read about. We'll see some other things. And the nice part about the 20th century here is that we actually have we have a lot of primary source material, right? We actually do have movies, right? We have video from the 1920s and audio recordings and photos. And so we can kind of get a little bit of a window into this period of history and just kind of see what it would have been like. Sophie, you didn't walk through the door 40 minutes ago, so
Me right now, I'm from the future.
you're now from the future?
Yeah.
Oh, so it's kind of like you went in your body sort of thing, like an X-Men apocalypse kind of, or not apocalypse, what's Days of Future Past kind of thing, right? So you're actually the Sophie of the future in the body of present
I can tell
Sophie.
you it's not gonna rain today.
Okay,
Yeah.
good to know. Can you tell us anything else from the future?
I can't even tell you too much, or else, you know the butterfly effect?
Oh.
Change the course.
All
I
right.
don't wanna do that.
Don't touch anything.
Yeah.
Don't look at anything. Don't tell us anything. Okay. Well, hopefully everything turns out well in the future. Okay. Other than that, well, you probably know I'm going to say this, but that's all I think we have for today. Pack it up. Tomorrow, come back and we'll look at life in the 1920s on video. Okay.